Hello and welcome back, friends. We made a brief survey of Australia in the previous part of this talk and had a quick glimpse of the text from there that we have in our course. We are now in New Zealand to take a brief look at the history of the place and to get a quick introduction to the text we have taken from this locale for study later in the course. The history timeline of New Zealand starts circa 1180 CE when the Eastern Polynesians discovered it and settled there. The country is located in the southwestern part of Polynesia, which is a sub-region of the larger geographical division called Oceania. Polynesia is a kind of triangular division comprising more than 1,000 islands in the southern and central zone of the Pacific Ocean. New Zealand is around 1,600 kilometers in the southeast of Australia. Apart from the main North Island and the South Island, the country extends over many smaller islands, some of which are hundreds of kilometers from the main territories of the country. New Zealand, as a beautiful group of islands, incorporates interesting contrasts and an interesting amount of biodiversity with volcanoes, long beaches, green valleys, lakes, and mountain peaks with snow. The most well-known cities of the country, Wellington, the capital, and Auckland, the biggest urban area, are in the North Island. From the most northerly point of the country in Nugent Island to the most southerly in Jacquemart Island, there is a distance of around 2,810 kilometers. And from the most easterly part in 44's group of islands to the most westerly in Cape Lovett, there lies a distance of around 1,565 kilometers. The coastline of New Zealand extends to around 6,000 kilometers, all due to the islands that the country has in its territorial domain. As noted earlier, the first humans to reach this remote and last discovered landmass were the Eastern Polynesians, reaching there just around 1180 CE, which is indeed very late considering the fact that even the parts of the tough North Canada were infiltrated by humans around 15,000 years ago. The descendants of these Polynesians are the Maoris of New Zealand today. There is an interesting bit of Polynesian mythology about the origin of the islands of this region that quite deserves a mention here. The myth speaks of Maui the fisherman, a demigod who made a fishhook from a magical jawbone, and as he threw it over, chanting his powerful spell for a good catch, the hook brought a whole island from the depths of water. The myth about the origin of the island of the region explains a common point about the belief systems of the indigenous peoples all over the world. The group of the indigenous people who reached the islands of New Zealand and settled there depended on fishing. They also did some agriculture, and some of them later moved into the forests to live there. These people have had a very powerful oral culture as the carrier of their traditional wisdom and knowledge systems. Talking of the Coop narratives in Maori mythology, William Schaeffer points out the unique strength of the traditional knowledge systems of the Maori, who identify this part of the world as Aotearoa in their language. The Coop narratives are midway between myth and folk tale. They have serious aim like Western history. They are real, operating in linear historical time, not the boundless, causal dream time of myth, detailed and scrupulous, researched, not improvised, and worth committing to memory. They connect culture to geography and specific landscape. They memorialize the skills and perils of navigating on the planet's largest ocean, about the certainty and permanence of land in a trackless water world, about the obtrusion of the past in a concrete, literal way into the present, the relationship of the Maori to the land and the fundamental meaning of land and landscape in their reality stem from the Coop stories more than from the Maui fish myth. William Schaeffer goes on to talk about the first encounters between the Maori and the first Europeans in cultural terms by saying that each looked upon the other as the other. While the white Europeans saw savages and cannibals in the Maori in turn saw pale demons in the white Europeans. Though the first European to have sighted New Zealand was Abel Tasman, the same Tasman who first discovered Tasmania for the Europeans, it took more than 100 years for the British to reach there after James Cook first landed at Poverty Bay in 1769. While the British fishermen and traders kept on visiting there for their own purposes, the region officially became a new British colony, separate from the colony of New South Wales in Australia after the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi between the British and the indigenes of the place in 1840. Soon after, in 1850, happened the first stage in the independence of the country when the settlers on the islands started making petitions for self-governance. The successive stages in the independence of New Zealand happened with the acquisition of the rights to conduct their own international negotiations in 1923, the New Zealand Parliament becoming a sovereign parliament in 1947 after the adoption of the Statute of Westminster 1931, and with the passing of the Constitution Act 1986 by the New Zealand Parliament, making the country a fully free constitutional monarchy with all its unlimited sovereign power vested in the Parliament of the country. In spite of their early skepticism in learning from the European settlers, many Maoris in late 19th century found a way to advancement in being receptive to the modern Western education. Many young Maoris thought that modern education was a way to enhance their community interests in traditional arts and crafts. And indeed, many of them did go on to achieve much by educating themselves in the colleges started for them. Apirana Turupa Ngata, who went on to become the acting Prime Minister of New Zealand, was one of them and is remembered for making significant contribution in the protection and promotion of Maori culture. This learning and accommodation hasn't been a one-way road in New Zealand, because the Pakeha, the Europeans too learned things from the Maori. In particular, the Pakeha learning from the Maori has been more visible in the areas of art and literature. Of special mention here should be that of the Maori Renaissance after the middle of the 20th century, which became more pronounced in 1970s and afterwards. The Renaissance led to several protective and proactive measures with regard to the language and other cultural assets of the Maori. A significant part of this Renaissance has been the arrival of modern Maori literature and art by way of adapting the European artistic genres to genuinely accommodate the native Aotearoa experience. Some critics and scholars identify this Renaissance as a form of cultural nationalism. From this Aotearoa New Zealand, we have picked up Carrie Hume's novel, The Bone People, the winner of the Booker Prize in 1985. Apart from the other features, which we will take up for discussion later in the course, the novel, in a way, brings forth Carrie Hume's vision of a humane assimilation of the European and the Maori culture in New Zealand. We have made cursory survey of the history and the culture of New Zealand in this part of the talk. And with this, we come to the end of this introductory unit of our course. The effort in these talks has been to acquaint and familiarize ourselves with the geographical and cultural locations of the regions of the world from where we have selected our texts for study and critical theoretical analysis. In the first two-part talk of the unit, we dealt with and settled the issues related to the nomenclature of this field of study. And in the subsequent three talks, each again divided into two parts, we traveled from Canada in North America to New Zealand in the Oceania via the Caribbean in the south of North America, South Africa in Africa, and Nepal in the Indian subcontinent. As we close this unit, this is Dr. Prakash Joshi, your course coordinator, asking you to please take care till we meet again to take up a relevant chapter from Margaret Atwood's non-fictional work, Survival.